This was President Hassan Sheikh's second.
So President Hassan Sheikh, the president of Somalia, 8 years ago, newly elected president, targeted Somali bomb attack.
Day on the job. His staff had summoned the media to his first news conference since he won Monday's election. It was to be with Kenya's Foreign Minister, Sam Ongeri. The Foreign Minister was just beginning his opening remarks.
So Kenya's Foreign Minister is sitting there just talking to the President of Somalia, and they continue this conversation in spite of the loud noises in the background. That was an explosion. There was a suicide bomber, and then there were like gunmen or some shit. 4 army people are going to die, and then a peacekeeper, an African peacekeeper, and 4 army people are going to die. 18 total. This is just 8 years ago, because the president of Somalia met with a foreign diplomat from Kenya. The people that attacked it was Al-Shabaab. 13 of the deaths are Al-Shabaab deaths, and then the other 5 were the 4 army and the
peacekeeper. An explosion rocked the building. It was followed by heavy gunfire. The only person.
So you just heard what about I don't know, what, 7, 8, 9 shots, and the cameraman is kind of like freaking out, and he's like all over the place, and then eventually he comes right back down to the president of Somalia, and the president of Somalia is just kind of relaxed, smiling, listening to the remarks of the foreign diplomat from Kenya. They're carrying on with this ceremonial.
Person apparently unfazed by
this photo op. This is how important a photo op is in Somalia.
A number of refugees. Then, about 10 minutes later,
another explosion. The president of Somalia is right in the middle of his remarks, and then you just heard that boom, right? And he's just kind of like waiting for the residual effects of the explosion to quiet down so he can go back to... Anywho, where was I at?
Both explosions came from suicide bombers. The first detonated his vest just outside the hotel where the meeting was taking place. The second, 100 meters away. A third attacker made it inside the hotel compound where he was shot and killed.
September 12th, 2012. There's a dead body with camouflage fatigues, but he also had sandals and jeans. So I don't know if that's what that.
Still wearing a suicide vest.
Oh.
The total casualty list: 4 Somali soldiers, 1 African Union peacekeeper, and 3 attackers.
Oh, 3 attackers. I thought it was 13. My bad.
The insurgents,
so 8 people died, not 18.
Describing it on Twitter as a successful attack.
This attack underscores just how volatile Mogadishu still is and how Al-Shabaab is still able to threaten the government. This building is in one of the most secure locations in the entire city. We're only...
You keep telling me that, but I kind of hearing different. Page 167. A painful episode. A painful episode. After the Battle of Pino del Agua, we set about to improve the organization of our guerrilla force, strengthened at that point by several Fidel's units. Our goal was to increase our usefulness and effectiveness in combat. Lieutenant Lopez, who had distinguished himself at Pino del Agua, was designated together with his squad, all of them very responsible boys, to be a member of the disciplinary commission. This commission would have the task of surveillance and would be charged with enforcement of respect for the rules of vigilance, general discipline, cleanliness, and revolutionary morality. But its life was ephemeral, and it was dissolved a few days after its creation. About this time, in the vicinity of the Botella, and a little camp that we ordinarily use as a way station, an earlier deserter named Cuervo, who had fled with his rifle 2 months before, was executed. What became of his gun, we will never know. However, we were well informed of his activities under cover of fighting for the revolutionary cause and of executing spies. He simply victimized an entire section of the mountain population, perhaps in collusion with the army. The trial was speedy in view of his desertion. We then had to proceed to his physical elimination. The execution of antisocial individuals who exploited their position of strength in the district in order to commit crimes was unfortunately not infrequent in the Sierra Maestro. Page 168. We learned that Fidel had completed his tour of the Sonador zone after attacking Chiverco and was once more in our sector. Consequently, we decided to march towards the Peladero in an attempt to join up with him as fast as we could. At that time, there was a merchant in the coastal area, Juan Balanza, whose ties with the dictatorship and the latifundistas were known, but he had never shown any active hostility towards us. He had a mule celebrated in the vicinity for its staying power, the kind of war tax. We made off with it with the mule. We arrived at Pinalito near the Peladero. On reaching its banks, we had to descend the steep cliffs. Should we sacrifice the beast, carve it up, and carry the meat? Should we simply abandon it in enemy territory, or should we have to go on as far as it was able? We opted for the last solution. Besides, carrying the meat would have caused problems. The mule made his way downward unhesitatingly, sure-footed in places where he had to crawl along to cling to lianas or to hang on like grim death to rocky protuberances. He went on even in places where our little mascot, a puppy, refused to walk, waiting to be picked up and carried. The mule gave an extraordinary display of acrobatic talent. He continued his exploits by crossing the Peladero in a place full of boulders by a series of incredible leaps from rock to rock. This is what won him his right to live. Later, he was mine to ride, my first regular mount, until the day he fell into the hands of Sanchez Mosquera. During one of our numerous clashes in the Sierra, it was in the vicinity of the Peladero that the painful incident occurred that led to the abolition of the disciplinary commission. A group of comrades hostile to the establishment of disciplinary standards were constantly cutting the ground from under it and preventing it from functioning. Such a situation should not continue. We had to take draconian measures. One of the rear guard squads played a tasteless practical joke on the members of the commission, which had dropped all other matters and was hastening to examine a very important problem. These jokers had stupidly deposited some hors d'oeuvre in order to bait them. Following the incident, various members of the group were arrested. Among the jokers had stupidly deposited some hors d'oeuvre. That was hors d'oeuvre. Excrement, dung. In order to bait, they deposited some shit. Okay, following the incident, various members of the group were arrested. Among them, Humberto Rodriguez, of sad repute due to his penchant for playing the role of executioner whenever we found ourselves faced with the painful duty of executing a malefactor. After the revolution triumphed, Rodriguez, with another rebel soldier as his accomplice, murdered a prisoner. They subsequently escaped from La Cabana prison. 2 or 3 comrades were imprisoned, along with Humberto. Under guerrilla conditions, prison didn't mean much, but when the crime was serious enough, a prisoner guilty of a lack of discipline would be deprived of food for a day or two. This was indeed a punishment that struck home. 2 days after the incident, when the principal participants were still prisoners, it was announced that Fidel was in the vicinity in the region known as El Zapato. I went to welcome and talk with him. We hadn't been together for more than 10 minutes when Ramiro Valdez came to us bringing news. Lalo Sardinas, and attempting with a slight excessive zeal to punish an undisciplined comrade, had held his pistol to the man's head as if he were going to shoot him. The gun went off unintentionally, and the comrade was killed on the spot. I wasted no time in going back to the camp and putting Lalo under guard. Hostility against him was rife. The men demanded a summary trial and execution. We began to take depositions and to look for evidence. Opinions were divided. Some of the men expressed their explicit conviction that it was premeditated murder. Others favored the assumption that it was an accident. It must be emphasized, independently of these opinions, that it is expressly forbidden by guerrilla law to inflict corporal punishment on a comrade, and that this was not Lalo Sardina's first offense. The situation was of the greatest delicacy. Comrade Lalo Sardinas had always been a first-rate fighter, a strict supporter of discipline, a man highly endowed with a spirit of sacrifice. Those who were making fierce demands for the death penalty, on the other hand, were far from the best of the group. The witnesses' declarations went on until nightfall. Fidel came to the trial. He was strongly opposed to the death penalty, but he did not deem it wise to make a decision of this nature without consulting all the fighters. The next stage of the trial called for Fidel or me to defend the accused, to observe the deliberations impassively, without showing the slightest trace of fear. After a series of impassioned statements in which death was demanded, it was my turn to take the floor and beseech the comrades not to treat this problem lightly. I attempted to explain that a comrade's death had to be ascribed to our conditions of struggle, to the very fact that we were at war, and that it was, after all, the dictator Batista who was guilty. My words, alas, did not carry a convincing ring to this hostile audience. It was already late. We had lit several pine torches, some candles, so as to continue the discussion. Fidel then spoke for a full hour. He presented all the reasons militating in favor of acquittal for Lalo Sardinas. He enumerated our faults, our lack of discipline, the other errors we committed daily, the resultant weakness, and he explained that in the end this indefensible act that had been committed in defense of the concept of discipline, and that we should keep that fact in mind. As he spoke, illuminated by the light of the torches, standing tall against a background of shrubs, his voice took on emotional overtones, and many of our men were clearly convinced by our leader's opinion. His enormous power of persuasion was put to the test that night. His eloquence, however, could not put an end to all opposition. We concluded that two possible punishments should be put to the vote: immediate death by shooting, or dismissal from the ranks. Just for throwing a little bit of poo? Come on, Shay! Inflamed spirits were influenced by a number of factors. In the course of this vote, in which the life of a man was at stake, we had to suspend proceedings because some were voting twice, and excited argumentation was fast distorting the terms of the solution. Once more, the choices open to the voters were explained, and everybody was asked to make his decision known at once. I was put in charge of tallying the votes cast in a little notebook. Lalo was beloved by many among us. We recognized his transgression, but we wanted his life to be spared, for he was a valuable cadre of the revolution. I recall that Oneria, a young girl who had joined up with us, asked in an anguished voice if she too could vote in her capacity as a member of the column. She was permitted to do so, and after all had cast their votes, we began to count the ballots. I recorded the results of this strange vote on little squares of paper. Similar to those used in medical laboratories, it was extremely close. After the last hesitations, here's how opinion was divided among the 143 guerrillas who voted. 70 declared themselves in favor of the death penalty. 76 for another type of punishment. By 6 votes, Lalo was saved, but that wasn't the end of it. The next day, a group of men hostile to the majority vote announced their decision to leave the guerrilla movement. This group included many elements of questionable trustworthiness, but there was also some pretty good boys among them. Paradoxically, Antonio Lopez, the chief lieutenant of the disciplinary commission, and various members of a squad were dissatisfied and left the rebel army. I remember several names: someone called Curro, a Pardo Jimenez, nephew of a Batista minister, which hadn't prevented him from taking part in the struggle. I don't know what happened to them leaving at the same time with the 3 Canizares brothers. Their fate was less than glorious. One of them died at the Bay of Pigs, another was taken prisoner there. After the attempted invasion by the mercenaries, these men who had not respected the majority and who disassociated themselves from the struggle, subsequently put themselves in the service of the enemy, and it was as traitors that they returned to fight on our soil. Our leaders and fighters' awareness was growing. The best among us felt deeply the need for an agrarian reform and an overturning of the social system without which the country could never achieve health, but they always had to drag behind them the weight of those individuals who came to the struggle out of nothing but a hunger for adventure and a hope of winning not only laurels but economic advantage. A certain number of other malcontents withdrew. I don't remember their names any longer except for Roberto, who subsequently spun out an interminable tale chock full of lies. Conte Aguero lost face by publishing in Bohemia. Lalo Sardinas was dismissed and condemned to win his rehabilitation by fighting the enemy as a simple soldier. One of our lieutenants, Joaquin de la Rosa, Lalo's uncle, decided to accompany him as a replacement for Captain Sardinas. Fidel gave me one of his best fighters, Camilla Cienfuegos, who had become a captain in our own column's advance guard. It was necessary to get moving without losing a moment so as to neutralize a group of bandits who, using the name of our revolution as a shield, committed their crimes in the region where we had begun our struggle, also in the Caracas sector and in Limon. Camilo's first mission in our column was to advance by forced march so as to capture all the undesirables who would subsequently be put on trial.